Imagine a cozy cafe. Everything's dark oak wood and inviting. It smells of freshly baked cinnamon rolls and freshly brewed coffee. There are books on display and a cat sleeping soundly on the counter. The place is filled with peace and calm, and there are people enjoying their dreams while reading or writing. There are no computers or phones to be seen. It's as if time has stopped and there is nowhere to rush. In another room, there's a group of people engaged in a quiet conversation, making new connections and learning new things. It's a friendly atmosphere of a tight-knit community that welcomes anyone new. The entire space is filled with magic. Magic that comes from books, chocolate, and mysteriously good bakes. But also from friendship, good conversation, and the cats who always keep you company and deliver exactly what you need. Welcome back to the Cat Coach Cafe. Me and the cat coaches, Aragorn, Apricot, and Prince, are delighted you found your way here once more, or perhaps for the very first time. This is a place where we slow down, tune to the season, take good care of ourselves, and share our love for all things cats, books, and well-being. In other words, we obey the rules of catful living. And because a cafe is also a meeting place, in each episode we welcome a special guest. This time it is author and traveler CJ Fentiman, who will share her experience of traveling and living in Japan and how a cat she found there changed her life. But before that, let's first tune into the moment. Slow down and grab that hot drink of yours. You know the drill by now. We are going to ease ourselves into the moment with our short drink meditation. As always, I encourage you to take this time just for yourself. Stop multitasking and really enjoy this hour we have here together. If you don't have your drink ready, now is the time to pause the podcast and get yourself some, for we are about to begin. Wrap the palms of your hands around your mug. Let the warm feeling fill your body. Doesn't it feel just so comforting? That warmth coming from the mug to your palms. Close your eyes for a moment and let the warmth travel all the way through your body. Now take a delicious deep breath and then exhale with a sigh. Open your eyes and look at your drink. Notice the color. What color is it? Then take the mug closer to you and deeply inhale its scent. Do it once again with your eyes closed. What does it smell like? Can you recognize the ingredients? Or perhaps get a more of an emotional response to the smell? Does it smell like chamomile, perhaps, or coffee, or rather like joy? Does it bring back some memories? Or perhaps it makes you feel stronger, more inspired, more alive. And maybe it just brings you to the exotic lands where it grew. And perhaps it's a combination of all of these. Just take it all in. And when you're ready, take your first sip. Slowly. Fully taking in its flavor. Does the taste surprise you? Or is it just how you expected it based on the smell? Take another sip and once again notice how it makes you feel. What emotions it brings. What memories or ideas. If you have a notebook and pen by your side, feel free to pause the podcast and make some notes if you feel inspired. And then whenever you're ready, continue sipping your drink at your own pace while listening to today's episode. Welcome to the month of March. If you're listening to this episode on its release day, it is still technically February, as it is released on the last day of February, but March is literally upon us. A month of new beginnings, a time we will welcome spring back. But before that, there is some tidying up to do, as well as some more nourishment awaiting us. The spring equinox, and that's the first spring day, are still 20 days away, but nature is waking up. However, she does it slowly. And slowness is what we should cultivate during this time as well. Let's not rush into the new season. Welcome it slowly and use our energy wisely. Let's not exhaust ourselves right at the very start. Remember, nature never rushes, yet everything is accomplished. So, trust in your dreams and the seeds that you planted. They will grow in its own time and exactly when they're supposed to, if you look after them well. There is no rush and no reason to exhaust yourself trying to speed things up. Perhaps that's the best lesson we can take from nature, especially at this time of year, which is a lesson in patience. So, rather than rushing, let's enjoy these last few weeks of winter to enjoy the delicious slowness and dreamy energy before the world speeds up again. Tune into your intuition. Ask yourself whether you are ready for the things you want to see blossom in your life this year. And if not, what steps do you need to take? How can you make some space in your life and prepare yourself better? If you feel inspired, feel free to pause the podcast now and do some journaling and see what comes up for you. And then come back when you're ready. If you still feel a little unprepared for spring, the best thing you can do for yourself is to go on a daily walk and watch nature slowly wake up. Not only will it help you keep a slow pace of life, as at this time the changes are still very small and subtle, but it will also help you bring some of that growth energy into your veins. After all, we are creatures of nature, and by surrounding ourselves with it, we naturally attune to its rhythms. So if you feel a little out of sync, just immerse yourself in the most natural healing energy of all. Just as March is about new beginnings, it is also about endings and conquering our fears, because new beginnings as well as endings can be a little scary. Both bring about the need to leave our comfort zones, even if it is just that of our cozy winter sleep. We need courage and we need to trust the process, just like the emerging green buds. So feel the fear, but do it anyway. Follow your heart, follow your intuition, and be kind to yourself as you do so. The new life may seem weak at first, but it possesses enormous strength and will to grow. And so do you and your dreams. Next week brings about Ash Wednesday, and though I am not religious myself, I find all religious traditions have something we can take away from them. Aside from my favorite part of any religious traditions being some delicious foods, in this case, once again, the traditional donut, we can take so much more from this tradition. But before we get to all that, let's take a little break and welcome our today's guest. CJ Fentiman has over 10 years of experience writing and has published 3 books on pets. Her most recent book, The Zen of Cat, has been translated into 6 languages and draws parallels between the peaceful, mindful attitude of Zen and the way cats live their lives, offering insights on how we can learn from cats' ability to live in the moment, be present, and exhibit calmness in daily life. Her previous book is a memoir called The Cat with 3 Passports, which chronicles her time in Japan and how the Japanese culture, as well as one silver kitten, changed her life. Her very first book, Traveling with Pets, is currently on its 6th edition and is all about finding pet-friendly accommodation. So if you're someone who travels with pets, this is your book to go to. As someone who's fascinated by Japanese culture and loves cats deeply, I was excited to dive into our conversation and ask CJ all the important things, including her visit to the cat island and the monk cat that lives in a cat shrine. What actually brought you to Japan and how long were you there?
Good question. Okay, so this takes me back to when I was backpacking in Australia. So we came to Australia probably late 20s, and there was a rush to get the whole working holiday visa done before we became too old to get the working holiday visa. And stayed here for a year, loved it. And then we just saw by chance an advert to teach English in Japan. I'd always been fascinated by Japanese culture. And I thought, well, why not? I wasn't ready to go back to Europe at that stage. So I thought, let's, make our adventure last a little bit longer. So we applied for the job, got the job, and went to live in Osaka, which was recommended by my hairdresser at the time, a guy in Sydney called Hisagoso. And he said, oh, because you're from London, you'll love living in Osaka. And he was kind of right. I mean, initially I liked it, but after living and experience the space of Sydney, I wanted something probably more connected to the outdoors and living near nature. So we only lasted, unfortunately, about 2 weeks in Osaka, and was like, oh, yeah, it was just too much. It was another frenetic city. So then we applied for another job in the Japanese Alps, surrounded by nature, mountains, and that suited us so much better.
You were staying at an apartment which came with 2 cats, which,
Yes.
as I read in your book, was actually one of the reasons you decided to go to be with cats again, because
Yes.
you had a really fond memories and relationship to animals generally. So that was one of the reasons why you decided to go. So can you tell us a little bit about Nico and Iko and
Yes.
how did all it start?
They were cats of the teachers that we took over from, who were Canadian, and it was quite a sad story. Iko and Nico were 2 sisters, and they found them. They were grey kittens, and they were tied by the neck outside a gym, which is really sad. And the Canadian teachers decided to take them home and rescue them. But then they obviously went back to Canada.
and they were going to ship them back to Canada, but then they said, would you be willing to look after them until we kind of resettle back in Toronto? And so we took care of them with the idea that they were going to get sent back. But obviously, shipping cats back all of that way is expensive and it's quite traumatizing for the cats. So we ended up finding homes for them. But just the fact of having cats in another country when you're far away from home just made the whole experience so much better for
Mm.
me. Going home and knowing that there was somebody there or two little cats there to I don't know, just make every day better. And it felt like home for me with the cats there for sure.
And at some point, you were actually living in with four cats, right? You were expanding your cat family while in Japan.
Yeah, I mean, that was never the intention, but I don't know, kind of found us wherever we went. So we had Iko and Nico, and then one night we were at a Japanese izakaya and I heard this meowing, and it was a very small tabby cat that we named Takashi, that was named after one of the bar staff at our favorite bar. And Takashi was not very well when we rescued him. He'd been living on the streets for some time and he had lots of, I think he had feline influenza, so very cold and sick, and eyes were always streaming. So we took him to the vet straight away. And I had to feed him this orange weird medication, and he hated it. So I had to put it on butter and then put the butter around his face so he would lick it all off. But he ended up being a real character. He was a great addition to the group. And then obviously we found Gershwin, who was my most favorite cat, and we ended up bringing him from Japan to Sydney. He was a silver tabby, very unique looking, bright green eyes, and yeah, a big, big character. So we had him as well. And then when we moved from Takayama and Gifu, we found another cat that had been dumped on the mountain and rescued her. And we found a home for her with my Japanese friend's grandmother, who had recently lost her husband. So she became a great companion and she's still alive today.
Which brings us to your magical cat or ninja cat. So, yeah, tell us a little bit about him.
So Gershwin we met probably about a year after living in Takayama, and then one day my partner was Roland was out walking, and he said, "Quick, quick, you have to come home. I found this kitten and I don't know what to do." So I drove back quickly after teaching kindergarten and found him with a cat basket on the side of the street, trying to lure a tiny silver kitten out with dried fish, which is very popular in Japan, and the cats love it too. So we managed to encourage this tiny silver kitten into the cat basket, but then we were like, well, what's the plan here? We already have two cats. We're not staying in Japan forever. So we tried to find out where he was from, but sadly nobody knew where he was from. We tried the local vet to rehome him, but obviously there was quite lots of other cats trying to get rehomed. So we just thought, let's just take him home and not worry about it. And then the longer he stayed with us, the more we fell in love. And so, I mean, you know what kittens are like and cats are like. They get into your heart and you don't want to leave them. So we ended up bringing him back to Australia. But within the time that we were living in Japan with him, I don't know, he just changed my view on life and commitment and yeah, and not everything being about myself. I guess having the freedom of being young and in your 20s, I was flitting from one place to the next, not really having much purpose, but having this tiny little
Mm.
being to look after made me kind of reevaluate life, its meaning. And yeah, there was a teaching even within our meeting, the purpose of life and what it means to stay strong and see things out. I was probably
Mm.
one of those people that would, if things got tough, I would probably go, oh, it's too difficult, I'll just leave. But being in a foreign country with this tiny kitten, I couldn't do that. I would never have left him. And so, yeah, it taught me to kind of, I don't know, have a bit more strength and resilience and to think of the bigger picture, I guess.
It's fascinating what cats can do with us, right?
Yeah, incredible. Yeah. And I
Because
never knew it was going to happen ever. It
mm,
was like a magical experience out of nowhere.
yeah, well, a similar thing happened to me because we never had cats or any animals or any pets. And my parents had a chocolate shop near a castle. So there was like nature around. And one day a stray cat came in and we started feeding her, and then she stayed. And a couple of weeks later, we found out that she's expecting kittens. I was at a point in my life where I myself was pretty lost. And, I finished uni. I was working in film industry back then, which was my dream. But I was really disappointed by it. And I was sort of like, I didn't really know what to do with myself. And then they came in my life and they completely changed it, like changed my priorities. And I don't know, it's just, I felt like even like what they did to my heart, I literally felt like I only just learned how to love. Like it totally altered my personality, basically.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I guess that comes back to the ikigai principle of the reason for being or having a purpose in your life. So before I went to Japan, I probably didn't have that much purpose. Went to university, looked at getting a career and jobs and
Yeah.
building my career ladder. And I always loved animals, but was told from a very early age, there's no money in animals. You have to work in a bank. And that was never me. And it was always somebody else's agenda. So I guess Gershwin and that whole experience of living in Japan brought me back to my essence and what I really loved, which was animals. So it was completely unexpected and out of the blue. But like you said, it's giving you that purpose again that
Yeah.
you take on other people's ideas of what you should be doing, which doesn't necessarily resonate with you. But then somehow cats teach you what you should be doing and where you should be in your life.
Yeah, and they completely redirected my life, to be honest. And now like my biggest dream actually is like one day be able to have like my own sanctuary for animals.
Yeah,
Like,
I would love that.
yeah, me
Totally.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's like even when, when days get tough, and times get tough, I'm like, the only thing that really matters is like helping animals. It's like
Yeah,
making the world
absolutely.
better. And it's
Yeah.
really, even when we had these strays come into our garden in the last 2 years, it's like I feel the most fulfilled when I'm helping animals, or in this case, cats. It's just, or even we had even two hedgehogs there that we had
Oh,
to take care of because winter was approaching and they were too tiny. It was so cute. They were coming for dinner, like one after the other at exactly the same time each evening. It was ridiculously
good.
cute.
I'm feeding a whole group of pigeons at the moment because unfortunately the guy who used to live there, he's selling the property. And I used to see him every day and his daughters used to feed the pigeons outside. And I said, my first question was not where are you moving to? It was what's happening to the pigeons? So I think he was quite happy because now he knows the pigeons are going to get taken care of. So now every day I'm walking to his house outside and feeding the pigeons for him.
Amazing. Yeah. So, would you say the concept of ikigai was it one of the main things you learned in Japan, like that enriched your life somehow? Or how did you even come across that concept when you were there?
Yeah, good question. So I honestly, there's so many things that I learned in Japan. I mean, ikigai is probably the most pertinent one. Um, but it taught me, I guess initially it taught me to reinvent myself. And then that's how I kind of managed to learn and grow into the whole ikigai thing. But initially, yeah, it stripped me of who I was. So I had to reinvent myself. So I went to Japan not really knowing who I was or what I was about. But it also stripped me of labels and it gave me the freedom to explore what I wanted to be, which then in turn led me to Ikigai. And at the time, I didn't really know what it meant. But when we moved to the Japanese Alps, I saw all of these people opening things that really mattered to them and were important to them. So there was one guy that had a reggae bar. He loved reggae music and he had
In Japan.
in
That's
Japan, yeah,
cool.
like um on top of a mountain as well. But he cooked Balinese food. So, yeah, the two don't really go together, but he was cooking like tropical food, but with a reggae theme on the top of a mountain. But somehow it worked, and it was one of the most popular bars at the time. Then there was another guy that we met that loved music, and he had a shop that only sold hemp products. There was another shop that was owned by vegans, and they had a vegan ramen shop, and the food was delicious. So there were all these kind of clues or signals. I didn't really understand what ikigai was at the time, but I was just observing all of these Japanese people that were starting up businesses that were a true passion. And it just made me question, like I'd always been brought up, you have to work in a bank, you have to work for a corporation, you have to have a career. Why don't we get taught that you can have a job doing something that you actually love and you're passionate about? But all of these Japanese people were starting up, things that they truly loved. And for me, that was so inspiring, especially coming from England, where you're kind of taught, go to university, get a career,
Yeah.
get a mortgage. And I mean, that wasn't really part of their reason for being. Their reason for being was doing something they were passionate about. So that was a massive lesson for me, although I probably didn't realize it until I left the country and had time to kind of let it sink in and have retrospects. But it's stayed with me for years. This whole idea of having a sense of purpose and doing something that you're passionate about. And it doesn't necessarily have to translate into money. It just brings you happiness.
Mm. So what was that for you? Did you find your ikigai?
Yes, I did eventually. I guess animals have always been my purpose. Growing up, I was lucky enough to grow up with my aunt that had horses and dogs and cats. But then, I was always told you can't work with animals, no money in that. But then obviously my love of travel. And so it wasn't until I came back to Australia with the cats and started to travel around Australia and realized that there was a bit of resistance to traveling with animals, particularly cats. There was lots of bylaws at the time where you weren't allowed to stay in accommodation with cats. That's changed, thank God, recently. But at the time, it was very, very difficult. So I was constantly emailing properties, can I come and stay for the weekend with my cat? Some would say yes, others blanket no, it's against the rules, you can't stay here. And so that's what led me to write my first book, which was Traveling with Pets on the East Coast. So I managed to find eventually different places that would allow us to travel and holiday with a cat or dog. And so since that started in 2012 now, we're on the 7th edition, just about to be released. There's so many places that allow dogs and cats because people realize that pets are our family. So that's been amazing. So I guess, pets and travel is definitely my ikigai.
So aside from your book, A Cat with Three Passports, where you share your story about your 2 years in Japan and all of these cats we just mentioned, you also wrote another book, which is about basically Japanese culture in connection with cats and their position within the culture, which is called The Zen of a Cat, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And that's a really fascinating read because actually it turns out that so many of Japanese sayings include cats in them. So it's really deeply rooted. Cats are really deeply rooted in the culture, which I found really fascinating. So can you tell us a little bit about that and maybe give us a few examples of these sayings?
Okay, so probably my favorite one. This is actually from The Cat with Three Passports. So each chapter has a title of a Japanese idiom. So one of my favorite ones is like a cat burying poop, which means to be very busy. Because if anyone's ever seen a cat in a litter tray, we all know how they like to dig and spend time and are very pedantic in a litter tray. The other one that particularly resonated with me is like a borrowed cat, because that's exactly how I felt when I first got to Japan. So, cats are not great outside their natural environment or their home. So being a borrowed cat, you can imagine, it's like being in an unknown situation and not feeling very comforted or at home. So that's my other favorite, I think, because it resonated with me living in another country and a different culture. And that's particularly how I felt when I first arrived in Japan. But the other book, The Zen of Cats, each of those chapters is a Japanese word from A to Z. So the first word is the letter A. So that's ane, which means peace in Japanese. And then the last word, Z, is Zazen, which means to meditate or sitting meditation. So for that chapter, I interviewed a Zen Buddhist monk who always meditates with his cats and lives and works at a Zen temple that is cat themed. So it was great to speak to him and get his insight into not just Zen, but what cats can teach us.
I don't remember which letter it was, but you actually talked there about a cat that was living with monks, or was considered to be a monk even. Is that correct? Do I remember it
Oh,
correctly?
that's right. Yeah, that was in the first chapter. Yeah, so that was Yuki, which means white in Japanese. So he's a she, I think. She's a white cat. Unfortunately, she passed away fairly recently, and so they have a new monk in training.
It's
And so
awesome.
I know it's pretty incredible. So you can go to this temple and meet the new monk in training. I think there's other cats there as well. But everything is cat themed. So it's Buddhist, but it's with a feline theme, I guess. So it's interesting because they've somehow integrated cats with religion, which is
Yeah,
pretty
it's
fascinating.
so fascinating. It's awesome. When I was reading it, I'm like, that's not even possible. That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for us in Europe, like it just would never happen. I don't think that you would have a church that would integrate
Yeah.
cats like that. So yeah, and I mean, it's not really done in a humorous way. It's done in quite a serious way. You know that this cat has something to teach us and the values that we can learn from it. So yeah, it's good, very good. It's positive, I think.
And that again, then they have a whole cat island there as well, which you visited, which is
Yeah.
very popular these days on social media as well. So, how was your stay there? What was it like?
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time to get there. So we had to catch the bullet train up from Tokyo up to Sendai. And then we had 22 stops from Sendai to Ishinomaki. And then we stayed the night in the hotel because the next day we got up quite early to get the ferry across. But it was very cute little things. Like at the ticket booth, they had a statue of Totoro, the manga, the cat manga, and lots of information about what to do with the cats when you meet them. And then you got the ferry across, which was a 45-minute crossing. And then when you arrived, there were lots of cat themed things, like even the bollards, they were doing some construction work. And the bollards were even in the shape of cats as well. So it was really, really cute. Um, so initially when I arrived, I was like, where are all the cats? And you didn't, I expected to arrive and see cats en masse, but they weren't. They were throughout the island. And so we bought some cat food from the local shop and then walked around the island. And then gradually you saw where they all were stationed. They had different locations where they lived. And so we would just feed random cats, whoever we met. We walked to the top of the island and there was a cat shrine dedicated to, I think there was a folk tale actually originally that has something to do with the island, which is why it's deemed the cat island. So we left cat food there, walked to the other side, which is a kind of beach, and the cats came and sat on us, and we were on the beach with all of these cats. So it was a really cool experience. And I remember walking back and there being a place where lots of people had been and lots of people had left pebbles that had cat illustrations on and
Hmm.
messages from all around the world. It was really quite a unique
Wow,
experience.
that's really cool.
Really cool. And then on the other side of the island, there was a summer accommodation. You can't stay there year round, but the accommodation was all cat themed. So it has a cat, like cat ears on the side. It was red and white. It was very, very cool to look at. So I'd like to go back maybe and stay in the accommodation one day.
It's so fascinating. Do you know how many cats live there at all? Like approximately?
I'm not sure how many, but I know that there's more cats than people.
Yeah.
That was the most fascinating thing. And there's a Japanese vet that goes there. I'm not sure how often she goes, but she has a little like pass books of all of the cats and how
Hmm.
many vaccinations they've had, who they're related to. So they're looked after pretty well.
Going back to your love for traveling, why would you say everybody should travel?
Well, I think everybody should travel just because it takes you out of your comfort zone and it allows you to establish yourself in a new light, I guess. I mean, the person that I arrived in Japan as was completely different to the person that I left.
Mm,
So, yeah, I guess I don't know if that would work if you go from Europe to Europe, but definitely going from Europe to Asia because the
mm,
culture is so different. You're kind of forced onto your own resources. You shed labels that you might have, being a British woman, and that doesn't really matter in Japan. You're just a foreigner, right? So it gives you a type of freedom that you probably wouldn't experience if you stay in your own country, I guess. And that was, for me, that was the biggest learning. It teaches you to appreciate different cultures and a different way of dealing with things or doing things. I remember probably this sounds ridiculous, but I remember that one of the biggest teachings that stick in my mind of living in Japan was vending machines. So we used to always order tea or coffee from vending machines because there was one right by our work. And in summertime, they used to turn the vending machine off so you couldn't get hot drinks any longer. So no hot tea, it would be cold tea. And for me, cold tea at the time was very, very strange. I
you
learned
as
to
a
like
British
it.
woman, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It would be black hot tea, right? So then it forced me to drink cold green tea. And I probably wouldn't have chosen it, but I learned to appreciate it and embrace it. And I still drink it now. So I guess, yeah, traveling just teaches you to go outside of your comfort zone and experience things that aren't necessarily embraced by your culture, but are embraced by another culture and for a good reason. Green tea is fantastic, whether it's hot or cold.
It opens your mind, right, to other
Yeah.
concepts of life.
Yeah. And I think, we can get very stuck in our ways. We have these preconceived notions of the right way of doing things because that's how we're brought up. And we don't ever really learn to challenge it because that's how things are. But when you go to another country, especially if it's out of Europe, then you realize that why do we think our way is the right way of doing things? These cultures are thousands of years old. Maybe there's something we can learn from them. And that's also what cats teach us as well.
Yeah, very true. I had a similar experience actually, even here within Europe when I went to Italy. And I always used to, we always used to think here in the Czech Republic, like, Italians are sort of lazy. They work for a few hours. You can never reach them when you need to in the afternoon because they're not
Yeah,
working
it's
anymore.
that north-south divide, isn't
Yeah, yeah,
it?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then I came there and I was like, I just, it was so amazing to be there because nobody was rushing anywhere. Everyone was like calm, enjoying the moment. And it's like, I'm like, why have I ever thought that our way is the right way? This is
Yeah.
life. They're actually living life. So
Yes.
yeah,
The
it's
Dolce Vita. There's a
yeah,
reason why they have a saying,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That said, what was the biggest cultural shock for you in Japan? Or something you couldn't get used to or was difficult for you to grasp at the beginning?
Uh, Probably I would say the work ethic. They work incredibly long hours. So I remember us working when we worked at British Hills, which was like a Japanese kind of a British kind of theme park in Japan. We as foreigners would be allowed to leave at 6. And then I remember all of my Japanese colleagues looking at the clock, like horrified, where are you going? But because we were foreigners, those rules didn't apply to us, but they would have to stay until the boss would leave. And then, sometimes the boss would be there till 10, 11 o'clock at night. And
Wow.
out of respect, they would not leave before the boss. So I guess for me, the work ethic would be definitely up there.
So they never even knew when they're gonna leave actually each day.
It's yeah, I mean yeah, out of respect, you
Wow.
wouldn't go before the boss. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know all Japan, but definitely where we were working, we were more regional. So I'm not sure if that would be the same in the big cities. Um, But probably also the politeness, which Japan is known for, which I love. But sometimes you might ask a question, particularly as a teacher, as students, and you might say, "Do you understand?" And they'd say yes, but that they didn't really understand at all. And so that sometimes could be quite challenging. But I mean, I love the respect and the hospitality of Japan, so it's not a criticism at all. It was, it was just quite strange, I guess, for me, being Brits kind of speak their mind, and if they don't understand something, they will say, but Japanese probably wouldn't. They'd say, yes, we understand, when for sure they might not understand. Yeah.
And what about the way they celebrate seasons? That's very famous, that they really make a sort of a big deal of the changing seasons. So how did you experience that? And is that
I
something
think,
you miss, perhaps?
yeah, I think at first I thought it was a lot of fuss about nothing. I guess I was a bit cynical about it. I was like, why is there so much fuss about, the change in season? It's just the cherry blossom, or it's just autumn. The maples are changing color, so what? But after living in Japan and realizing how much respect they have for nature, and, the beauty of slowing down and watching the changing of the leaves is absolutely incredible. So, it was actually my fault and my ignorance for not respecting, again, their views and their way of being, because I remember watching on the news on NHK, they would have a map of the changing seasons. Oh no, sorry, of the cherry blossoms, and which region would the cherry blossoms would be in bloom. And at first I was like, this is crazy. Why is there so much fuss about this? But it's so fleeting. Why wouldn't you be drawn and focus on that rather than all of the negative news that we often, focus so much on? It's a much more positive thing, I think, now in retrospect, to focus on the beauty of nature than on, what Donald Trump is doing, for example. Yeah.
And I think it's this theme of impermanence that's so deeply rooted in Japanese culture, isn't it? As well.
Yeah. Yeah, the fleetingness of nature and the fact that nothing lasts forever, and the whole concept of ikigai, which is one time, one meeting. And it teaches us to appreciate one moment, which oftentimes I think we can, I'm very guilty of being invited to a party or a get together and not really wanting to go, and going there and, like, maybe looking at my watch thinking I could be at home with my cats now. But having that whole concept of this one time, one meeting is making you appreciate that this coming together of people, this moment in time, won't ever happen again. And to make the most of it, because one moment is fleeting. And so there's a real beauty in that, I think. Yeah, that every moment is irreplaceable. And we should cherish each moment. Even like now, me speaking to you, it might not happen again. So, yes, being mindful of what you're doing at the time, at the moment, is a really beautiful and amazing concept to have.
Which is funny because it just makes me realize how cats are so deeply rooted in Japanese culture as well. And just this concept that you just described is something I learned from losing my cat, actually. And the whole experience, it could be, it's exactly the same. So it's just Japanese culture and the teachings of cats generally are actually so close. It makes so much sense that they have such a position in the culture.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a fanatic about Japanese literature, so I've recently read The Blanket Cats, The Cat That Goes to the Library. I'm not sure if that's the right title, but I Am a Cat by Sozeki. There's so many, and they get Traveling Cat Chronicles, all of those books. And I think I love them because they don't, how can I say, like, they teach the importance of life, but they're very slow. So they don't have like a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's not like a Hollywood drama, but they have a really beautiful teaching about life and the importance of life and the importance of interactions between people and how everything is interconnected. And so that's why I really love Japanese literature, definitely.
And yet they have the cats to deliver these messages in the books.
Yes, yeah, and the cats seem to show up right at the right time, as Gershwin did with me. So yeah.
What was your favorite season to be in Japan?
For sure, it would be spring, although nowadays, I think last year, I think Tokyo was the most visited city in the world. So I went back last year and it had completely changed. Like tourism has gone, yeah, off the chart with the amount of people that are visiting. But yeah, ch the cherry blossom season for sure is just so beautiful. Probably actually my favorite might have been autumn, just because of where I was living, there were so many maple leaves and the changing of the color. It was so stunning to look at. Yeah, I think I don't know, that's a tough one, whether I prefer spring or autumn, actually. I'm not sure. Both for maybe different reasons. Um, but yeah, I think that whole having festivals about different season. We don't really, I mean, we have Harvest Festival, I guess, in the UK, but you don't really understand why you're celebrating it as much. But in Japan, everyone knows why they're celebrating cherry blossom season. So there's a lot more maybe awareness about nature that we seem to be lacking, I think, in some countries for sure, or some cultures.
What is the thing you mo miss the most about Japan?
A lot, actually. I would like to go back and live there, I think. I would say definitely the seasons, as we have just said. I was living in far north Queensland for 4 years. We've recently moved back to Sydney, and it was just hot and hotter. So there's like 2 seasons. It was amazing. I love living up there, but the wet season is, yeah, very trying at some points because it's so hot and so wet. But yeah, the different seasons in Japan make you, I think, yeah, appreciate life and the fleetingness of life, that things do change and you can't control that. So you don't feel like maybe you're so in control. It makes you feel small in a way because, yeah, all of this change around you that you can't control. So it's humbling. Other things would be definitely the hot springs, the onsens. It took me a year to get the courage to sit in an onsen and be naked with other women. I found it very, very strange. That's probably been a very prudish British woman. But it was amazing, so liberating, and no one really stared at you. You were just in there. So whenever I go back to Japan, I always make sure I'm staying near an onsen because that's my most favorite thing.
It's so funny because in your book you describe it really openly how that actually terrified you at first, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and then it becomes the thing you miss the most. It's
Yeah, but
so interesting.
that's often the way it is. I think I was
Yeah.
speaking to a work colleague yesterday about students because I'm still teaching, and I spoke to my one of my workmates, and we were saying, oftentimes it's the students that you might find the most difficult to begin with end up being your most favorite at the end. So I think
Mm,
there's a teaching even within that, things that you don't like straight away are often the things that you love. I don't
mm.
know why that happens. There's something in that that is very, very powerful. So yeah, don't give up on the things that you don't like because often they can be the things that you love. It's very
Or
powerful when you know
what
that.
you need.
Or what you need at the time. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other things that I miss, obviously, are Japanese hospitality and politeness. So I went back to Takayama after not being there for 10 years.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, one of the waiters or waitresses, Takako, remembered me. And she
Mm,
remembered exactly the food that I used to love in her Japanese restaurant.
wow.
Without me even ordering it, I was sitting down having a drink. And she said, "Here we are, Carla." And I was like, oh my God, I had even forgotten the food that I used to eat there, but she'd remembered every dish that I liked and brought it out to me and laid it in front of me. And I was like, oh my God, so nostalgic, all of these
Mm.
foods that I loved and how she remembered me, compared to all of the people that she'd served off over the last 10 years was just so special. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you say was the biggest lesson or something that really changed your life, changed your, I don't know, I guess everyday life or your approach to life?
That's a good question. I guess maybe not being in a rush for things to happen so much. So
slowing down, especially where we were living in the Japanese Alps, no one was in a rush, and you couldn't be in a rush because you'd be in like a snow prison in the winter. You weren't going anywhere. So just let things unfold. If things are going to happen to you, they will happen to you. You don't need to force things to happen. I think often in the West, we're on this kind of treadmill. We have to make things happen. We have to be seen to be, doing our best and making things happen. Nothing's going to just turn up. But that's not necessarily true, I think. Sometimes you need to step back from your life and evaluate and understand what you want, and just let things evolve, a bit like cats. They're not in a rush, and they live their best lives. So I think it's just living in tune with nature, perhaps, and maybe not following other people. I think, especially when I was growing up and being, teenager or 20s, I would often listen to what my friends were saying and be very influenced by the people I was surrounded by. But sometimes stepping outside of that can help you really understand who you are and what you want. You don't have to make other people happy. You can make yourself happy, although that sounds pretty selfish, but I don't mean it in a selfish way. I mean, finding the things that bring you joy might not be what your best friend finds joy in, but it might be what gives you joy. So trying to find that one thing that brings you happiness is really, really important. And often we're so distracted and so busy with technology, social media, friends, socializing, we don't give ourselves time to find that. But in Japan, I was able to, and I'm very, very grateful.
That just brings me to one line that I highlighted. I think it was in The Zen of a Cat, where you wrote a thought that goes like, are you really busy or are you just afraid?
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's just so powerful.
Yeah. I can't actually remember writing that, but yeah.
Yeah, it's in your book.
Yeah. But it's true, yeah, because I'm probably guilty of it now. We find ways to fill our time to stop us probably facing ourselves a lot of the time. So distraction is not great. Sometimes we need to confront ourselves and find ourselves and say, hey, what is it that you really want? Because sometimes it's easier to ignore the things that we do want because that's a risk. But we have to take risks to find who we are and go where we're supposed to go. It's not ever going to come to you. You have to, whether it's going to live in another country or leave your current job or leave your current partner, it's never, ever easy. But the benefits of doing it you'll be heavily rewarded for sure if you take risks, I think.
Or even taking in a cat that you never planned for taking in.
Yeah, because that's taken me on a whole new trajectory that I never thought would happen. Taking in Gershwin, I didn't ever expect that to lead to writing books. I was supposed to go back to London to study my master's like 9 months after. I think we were supposed to go to Japan for 9 months, teach English, go back to do my master's. I never finished my master's degree, and that's because of Gershwin.
And because we talked about this time of year being a time to face your fears and follow your heart, I thought I would share a bit of wisdom on that topic from your Cat Coach Princ. After all those years of living side by side with humans, I think I can confidently say what is their greatest shortcoming. Sure, there are many ways in which they make their lives unnecessarily complicated. In fact, they are pretty creative in that respect. I have to give them that. But the one thing I noticed, which I believe is causing them the most pain, is their relationship with fear. Now, fear is a natural part of everyone's life, be it a cat or a human. And us cats know a fair share about being scared. In fact, it is quite easy for us to get scared, and we are not proud of it. We get scared of unknown humans, loud sounds, new smells, new environments, or someone suddenly noticing us and talking to us without permission or prior warning. The last one can be pretty unsettling, I can tell you that. It is in fact an exemplary scenario for activating the freeze strategy and pretending you're not there. Apricot uses this tactic especially at the vets, and so far it hasn't let him down. He survived every time. So we're pretty understanding when it comes to fear. However, as you can tell, all the examples from our cat lives are real life-threatening situations, and that's where the silliness of humans starts. You see, cats, unlike humans, have top-notch survival instincts, and we very much know when exactly to activate them and why we are activating them. We also recognize when the dangerous situation passes and we can continue our day as usual. However, humans seem to mix things up as always. So first, they overuse the freezing technique, and second, they use it in all the wrong situations. They can stay in the freeze mode for hours, days, weeks, or even months or years, which every cat knows it just isn't sustainable. Plus, humans get scared of the most peculiar things, most often thoughts, which, as every cat knows, you can't sniff, touch, or see, so you could investigate it well enough and evaluate potential danger they pose. I know I myself seem like a brave cat with my adventurous attitude and all, but I must confess I do get scared pretty easily myself. The thing is, though, one becomes brave with practice and with the right set of tools to face these challenges. So here are mine. When you get scared, you take tiny, careful steps in the direction of whatever it is that you're fearful of. Be it a weird sound or smell, perhaps. You don't stay hidden because there's nothing worse than wondering for the rest of your day or life what it could have been and whether it was really threatening. Or maybe fun. You just don't want to miss out on anything potentially good. So, you take small, careful, cautious steps. You inspect, you sniff, you look behind the corners, you stay as low as possible and as quiet as possible. You touch anything unusual in your way with your paw, carefully. You continue like this, and with every step, you get closer to facing your fear. And with every step, you're becoming a tad braver. And that really is the know-how for life. You just have to walk towards the things that scare you. Because otherwise, you'll keep wondering for the rest of your life all those what-if questions you humans seem to love so much. I don't understand why humans seem to like to spend so much of their time in the invisible world of thoughts. It really is beyond me. It's so much more fun to be in the real world. Plus, in the real world, you also learn quicker. And when you learn, you become less scared. And then you don't have to spend your life hiding with even more uncomfortable thoughts as your only company. Ah, what a relief. In the worst case scenarios, if it truly turns out you're facing a life-threatening situation, you will just activate the freeze scenario for a bit, as every sensible cat would do, or run away as fast as you can and hide, temporarily. But from my own experience, I can tell you, in most cases, it won't be life-threatening at all. The only thing that will be threatened here is your ability to stay stuck in your fear. This excerpt was taken from the Cat Coach Diaries called A Guide to Facing Your Fears, which you can find on my Substack with many others at catcoachdiaries.substack.com. This is also the home of the Cat Coach Cafe podcast, so if you subscribe, you won't miss a thing. Ash Wednesday falls to March 5th this year, and it marks the end of the Carnival or Mardi Gras celebrations, as well as the start of the fasting season that lasts for 40 days, ending with Easter Sunday. And why Ash? Because we are reminded of the fragility of life. Dust you are, and to dust you shall return. This season thus invites us to reflect and evaluate. what in our lives is serving us and what no longer isn't. What relationships ran its course and have no longer place in our lives. What is broken and what can be repaired or is even worth repairing. We let go of the pain of any wrongdoings, both done to us as well as those we may have caused ourselves to others. It is time for forgiveness so we can move forward in our lives. A time to let go of any negative energy, any habits that no longer serve us, and any dust. Which brings me to the perfect time for some decluttering of not just our minds and lives, but also our spaces. Welcome spring with a clean home, more space in your drawers, and clean sheets. Do some deep cleaning, both of your mind and your space. Let go of everything that no longer brings you joy, everything you see no potential in. And then say a prayer. Again, you don't have to be religious for this. I am not myself. Think of the prayer as a wish that you say out loud or quietly. Say your wish to bring it into your life this year. Invite it. It's similar to affirmations, really. And as for the fasting bit, which in the past was both connected to religious tradition, but also hugely a necessity as the winter supplies were thinning, we can also utilize it despite having an abundance of everything these days. We all have something in our lives that we consume far too much often, or that isn't exactly serving us. This could be food, like sweets, dairy, or meat, which our ancestors all avoided at this time. But also in our modern times, it could be, for example, coffee, or too much caffeine generally, or perhaps chocolate, or too much of social media, or too much dependence on technology generally. So, why not challenge ourselves at this time to give up one thing we love or one thing we are addicted to for the next 40 days, or at least minimize the amount we consume. Perhaps we may benefit from a digital detox, which will help with not only our well-being, but with decluttering of our minds too. Challenge yourself. Strengthen your will. It will help you keep going when times get tough. And if you need some extra support, come to my Instagram or to Substack and let us know what it is that you decided to fast on so we can all support each other. We have once again reached the end of our time together. We'll see each other in 2 weeks' time again for what will be our last episode of season 1, so definitely do not miss it. We'll talk more about cats and trusting in our path. Meanwhile, don't forget to subscribe to Cat Coach Diaries on Substack to get notified when new episodes are up, but also to not miss any of the Cat Coach Diaries. If you would leave a rating, a comment, or follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you listen to this podcast, we would appreciate it so very much, as it would help us not only reach a wider audience, but also to continue doing what we do and bring you more podcast episodes in the future. So if you'd like us to continue, please show your love. Until next time, stay cozy, stay warm, and cuddle those cats of yours.